why is it that whenever Israel, you know, the Israeli death train gets on the track and starts chugging along, and plows over thousands of babies and just starts rampaging, that's the only time that the ADL starts howling about a $7 billion increase in anti-Semitism? So there's kind of a clear correlation between Israel's mass murder shooting sprees, you know, the race riots they conduct throughout the West Bank, their pogromist policy towards the Palestinians, and the ADL claiming that anti-Semitism is raging. So wouldn't that kind of debunk what Biden is saying, that Israel keeps us safe? It's obvious. The greatest threat to Jewish safety in the United States or Europe or anywhere in the world is the ethno-supremacist state of Israel. Without Israel, without Zionism, we'd just be a bunch of, as I said last week, we'd be like the Episcopalians, except funnier.
And Wyatt Reed pointed this out. Wyatt Reed of the Grayzone pointed out that when you read the fine print of the ADL saying there's more than 2,000 anti-Semitic incidents, 45% of those alleged anti-Semitic incidents were actually anti-Israel rallies. So if you protest against the genocide in Gaza, you're taking part, by definition, according to the ADL, in an anti-Semitic incident.
Yeah. You are an anti-Semite if you're upset. I mean, it's ridiculous. We actually have reached out to the ADL and asked them for the raw data on their anti-Semitism report. We want individual incidents. We want to see what the data shows, and we'll be waiting for that.
Yeah, good luck with that. I think they'll be waiting.
Yeah. Well, anti-Semitism is everywhere. I mean, I just don't feel safe as a UPenn graduate anymore. Do you feel safe, Aaron?
I feel, I mean, I feel deeply embarrassed at the behavior of fellow Jews right now. The absolute self-victimization, claiming to feel unsafe. Here's one new example here's someone complaining that a dining hall at a college isn't calling Israeli salad anymore. Imagine returning to your dining hall to find that salad labels were renamed to remove mention of the salads being Israeli. That happened at Yale this week. It's the subtle changes and redactions that are the most pernicious. So
I feel like we need to read it in like a different voice, but yeah. I mean, these are the real atrocities taking place. I mean, you look at all these anti-woke commentators and like pro-Israel and they get upset about the slightest, most picayune affront that's always related to language. And meanwhile, you can just scroll through my Twitter feed and just see genocide unfolding in real time. Just the most horrific agony of humanity that I've ever witnessed within the Gaza Strip. And they don't care. This is what they care about. They're the most narcissistic, demented people in our society.
And by the way,
the biggest hypocrites.
And genocide or not, I mean, I would argue it shouldn't be called Israeli salad to begin with, because what is so much of Israeli cuisine? It's stolen from Palestinians, like everything else they do, including their land.
Yeah, Israeli salad is like they call it Jerusalem salad, but it's basically the way that Arabs make the cucumber, onion, and tomato. Yeah. And they put some olive oil and salt on it and whatnot.
Like were our ancestors, you know, mine were in Hungary, Max, you know, yours, I assume come from Eastern Europe. Okay, there we go. Were they having Israeli salad?
My ancestors, my ancestors in the shtetl were eating Israeli salad and falafel. Yeah. We're eating it for hundreds of years. I don't know what they ate, like pickled herring or something. Like
exactly. No, exactly. That's what they're eating. Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't like, you know, some food that you can really export. It's a very acquired taste. But no, the Israeli couscous actually was a Ben Gurion innovation. He was a botanist or an agronomist, and the Israeli couscous is larger than traditional North African couscous. He managed to make it with less water. It was like one of the few Israeli innovations. The rest is totally stolen. Like everything is just from somewhere else.
Here's that here's that Israeli professor at Columbia, Shai Davidi, who's constantly complaining about how he feels persecuted on campus because his school lets students express themselves, including saying chants like Intifada, Intifada, long live the Intifada. He says Columbia has two choices: expel organizations that explicitly call for violence against Jews and Israelis, or show the world it won't enforce its own rules and face legal consequences for unequal enforcement. So basically, those are Columbia's two choices: either expel groups that are chanting "Long live the Intifada," or admit that you just won't enforce your own rules and get sued because you refuse to crack down on free speech. And we should talk about that for a second, because I don't know if you watched the hearings, Max, with the president of Harvard and president of Penn, where Elise Stefanik sort of like harangued them into committing to crack down on free speech. But the problem is with both these school presidents, the reason they look silly in saying, in being able to basically say if calls for genocide violated school policies, is because they accepted the stupid premise of the question that basically saying from the river to the sea is a call for genocide. And I don't know whether it was a lack of preparation or just a complete political cowardice, where because they couldn't tell Congress member Stefanik, actually, no, someone saying from the river to the sea is not a call for genocide. Because they couldn't say that, then it actually looked like they were sort of indifferent to calls for genocide. Really, all they could have said was, well, actually, people have the right to say whatever political slogans they want. And whatever you think of from the river to the sea, it's not a call for genocide. Because they couldn't do that, they put themselves in a corner. And the president of Penn, after a harassment campaign from wealthy donors, had to resign.
Yeah, and just quickly, some people are correcting me or asserting in the chat that those pearl couscous is maftoul, which is a Palestinian invention. So I was just trying to be charitable. Anyway, yes, the display put on in Congress was a mediocre performance by the college presidents, who are just mediocre people who don't understand the issue, weren't well briefed. They walked into an ambush by Elise Stefanik, who is a trained, well-honed Israel lobby cadre who had just been at a Zionist Organization of America dinner, hanging out with all of the late Sheldon Adelson's acolytes, Morton Klein and company, like the biggest racists and fascists within the elite Zionist world. And she's one of them. And they just thought that they were going to sit there and be treated to like fair questions. They weren't prepared at all. And all they needed to say was, such as what? Such as what expression of genocide? What are we talking about here? Yeah. And the fact is, if someone ran around UPenn's campus calling for the genocide of Jews, saying gas the Jews or something like that, there would be criminal investigation or something. They would be definitely detained to see if they were dangerous neo-Nazis. Like, nobody does that. The other thing is, all of these allegations that are designed to define traditional speech associated with Palestinian protest with criminal behavior and neo-Nazism, they're bound up with other false intrapersonal allegations that we heard when the House GOP hosted a bunch of students who were actually themselves Israel lobbyists. None of them were just students, claiming that professors had said things like gas the Jews and I hope the Jews die and things like that. And they never produced any evidence because they're lying. They're just completely making it up. So the no calls to genocide have taken place. It was hypothetical. And UPenn's president, Liz McGill, is gone because of a hypothetical debate. Well, that's not really why she's gone. She's gone because this is how power works in the US. If you're president of UPenn, president of the United States, you're answering to pro-Israel billionaires. And if they threaten to pull $200 million off campus, which is what happened at Penn, then you're going to get the axe and you're going to deliver a hostage video where you first apologize, and you're going to be publicly humiliated, and then you're going to resign. And if you don't resign, they're just going to keep antagonizing you forever. If you give them 1 inch, they will take a mile. That's the way. And these are the same forces that Biden has subjected himself to. In some ways, I think Bernie Sanders is subject to these forces. He used to, he meets with AIPAC's local chapter in Vermont all the time. So this is how power works in America. And so what does this mean for democracy? What does it mean for free speech? It means just look at all the forces that oppose free speech. And we talk about them all the time here. And a lot of people on the right agree with us when we talk about the censorship industrial complex, NewsGuard. The right's all upset about NewsGuard, this online anti-alternative media censorship machine funded by the State Department. We were talking about them before they were. Though they don't have as much power as the Israel lobby does to not only censor, but to actually redefine language and speech as criminal behavior, and then to change policies within institutions in order to prevent people from being able to say that. So the Israel lobby is, I think, the greatest threat to free speech in the United States. And it doesn't even represent something within our country. It's not even like something, I mean, it is something within our country, but it represents a foreign apartheid state 5,000 miles away that's currently carrying out a genocide. So,
and who's the only member of Congress who's really called this out forcefully? Thomas Massie, who's a Republican. Ilhan Omar did once, but she got so viciously attacked after she said it's all about the Benjamins, baby, that she's, I think, retreated a little bit on calling up. So Thomas Massie, a Republican, recently called this out, the role of AIPAC in Congress, and I believe also he's called out the attacks on free speech, although maybe I could be mistaken. But there's no one willing to really call this out, and that's a great point. They're so much more effective in silencing political speech than anybody else.
And the how do I want to say it? You know, we talk about all the kinds of McCarthyite campaigns on our streams, like Russiagate, for example. And, you know, you've been attacked as a spreader of misinformation on Syria for doing critical reporting on Syria regime change operations. If we try to explain that to, you know, the average liberal here in Washington, D.C. or New York City, they might not know what the hell we're talking about. But when it comes to Palestine, it just seems like all across the world, people increasingly get it. Okay, maybe some older white evangelicals in the red states won't get it. And yeah, you don't expect, you know, certain elements within, like the Jewish American establishment isn't on our side, but within the Democratic Party, at least, most people are just cringing in disgust at what's happening in Gaza. And yet there is no ability for them to express themselves the same way there is within the Republican Party, where people are actually able to find a voice within Congress to voice their disgust on their money going to the Ukraine proxy war. There's no channel anywhere. And so the frustration is so extreme. It's us butting up against a political class that's controlled by a genocidal billionaire class, whether you're on campus or in Congress. And and there's no remedy to it right now.